Yeah, the makeup looks good. Can't see the headphones. The makeup looks good on camera too.
Oh,
it doesn't look shiny or heavy.
That's good.
No, I can't see the headphones.
No?
No.
So, the first question is pretty short, so I think I'll play it and I'll say 30 and then maybe read it and then we'll wait for like however else I've got on here until it starts maybe. Or would you rather me yell out 20, like read it at 20 seconds?
Yeah, I'll yell at 20 and I'll read it and then whichever one.
Doesn't
30
really
or
matter
20.
like how much of a delay there is because it's going to be edited anyway, hey?
Yeah.
Right. Let me know when you're ready.
So, just give a single clap. Doesn't have to be too loud. So just on camera. So I want to, because you got a separate audio source to this video.
Yeah.
That gives it a point that they can easily identify to sync it up.
Cool.
So you're not in a samurai movie. So you just give a clap up at your face.
I do it.
Yeah.
Oh,
because the camera has to see you do it.
Oh, okay. At 30 seconds?
No, just now. So because the audio is running.
Okay.
And the video is running. So whenever you're ready, you can press play and start it.
It's 20 seconds now.
How did Jim Morrison get into your life? Yeah, keep looking at me.
I wish I had a tale to tell you about it being the summer of 1967, but I'm convinced there was some sort of mistake when I was born. Jim's only featured in my life prominently for the past 10 years or so. I had heard the more popular Doors songs when I was younger, and I was vaguely aware of the band, but not really of Jim or what he was all about. And then in my dark and brooding teens, I seemed to develop quite an interest for reading quotes on existentialism and researching an array of philosophical topics, a lot of Nietzsche and other great philosophers, and Jim Morrison's name seemed to come up quite often under many quotes that he had said throughout his life, as he quite often discussed topics of that nature and had many profound words to say on such matters. I remember the first quote I ever read of his being, "This is the strangest life I've ever known," from Waiting for the Sun. I was incredibly drawn to his words, and I decided to research him and discovered that he was the lead singer of The Doors. And then I really began to immerse myself in their music and in his poetry. So I devoured any material I could get my ears, eyes, and hands on, and fell completely in love over the years. The rest is history, and that love just continues to grow and grow every year, every day. His words are what first drew me to him, and they continue to daily. I guess it didn't really hurt that he was easy on the eye as well, but I'll do my best to abstain from going on any tangents of objectification here, as I really don't think Jim would appreciate that too much. I'm done. The earphone was like falling out of my ear.
Oh no!
Do you think I could put both in somehow, or just like probably be too obvious? You have to do it like I gotta keep pressing play every time. Unfortunately.
Yeah, you have to like put one in like that.
Should be okay, I just jam it into my ear.
Jam it in more, I don't want to hurt you.
You can jam it in.
Oh, okay.
And at the end of each answer, just leave a bit of a pause
Yeah.
at the end so that there's some before you start moving. Or...
Okay, yeah, cool. Alright, can you see it? Can't see it?
Nope.
No.
Okay, so do you reckon
Where's-
20 seconds is too long to wait, or is that okay?
Ah, that's alright.
I'm just like separating the calls.
Yeah, wait for this dude and his thing to move on.
Can't really hear, sorry. 20.
Oh, we can't record while that's
I
driving.
couldn't really hear it.
The microphone's definitely.
So do I have to do the clap every time?
No, only when I start recording them.
Oh, right, okay.
So that they can be joined.
Cool.
And at the moment I'm just continuously recording.
I'm waiting for that noise to go away.
Oh.
Now we got a bird singing. Oh. Alright, so press play.
Yep.
What part of Jim's art got you?
For me, it's really the divine combination of all of it. His words, you take an incredibly well-read, articulate and intelligent being, riding the hallucinogenic wave that swept over the mid-60s, and you arrive at intensely vivid and vision-inducing language, conjuring imagery of both profound and playful topics. And then, of course, the music that accompanies that. The Doors are a hypnotic ocean of sound, and Jim's voice and words ride the waves in that ocean, and I feel like I'm riding those waves with them. I also really relate a lot to his extremes, his darkness and his light, the heaven and hell coming together to create an oral playground and often roller coaster for you to explore and accept those extremes. For me personally, I find that a great cathartic release and really raises my frequency anytime I listen to the Doors.
Good.
God, it was like falling out of my ear again.
Oh no.
That could be awkward.
What are you like?
It's in there now.
What's playing on your
Hey?
phone? What's playing on your
Just
phone?
like things to remind me of my points.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Because I'm in no state to remember anything at the moment.
Yeah.
So I was going to rehearse last night, but I'm like, fuck it.
No.
I'm just going to record the things.
That's fine. That sounds pretty good so far.
Alright, you ready for the next one?
Yep.
I think I might just yell out when it's 10 seconds because it seems like a really long time, hey, that we're
Yeah.
waiting. Ten.
How did Jim's music poetry help you in your personal life?
Well, everyone's human experience is different, so words are entirely subjective, and the applied metaphors and meaning derived from them is entirely personal. That is the beauty and power of language, and while a lot of the meaning that I have derived from Jim's work and the help that he has given me will remain between Jim and I, in a general sense, I can say that he has helped me and inspires me constantly. I have lyrics and poetry running through my head all day, especially at particularly relevant moments and in the calm calculus of reason, of course. I interpret his words more so as philosophy and profound words to live by, daily mantras and a constant guide. And for the more fanatical, cult-like followers among us, of course, prayers and commandments. I find Catholicism in anything that resonates with me. It's always different, but there's always something that can be interpreted and applied. If I'm ever reading Jim's poetry books, I find myself scanning his books sometimes thinking, help me, Jim. And more often than not, he does. I can read the same poem or listen to the same song, and depending on what I'm experiencing in my life at the time, the meaning I take away from that and the advice or help that I derive from it is entirely different each time. So yes, his work is incredibly therapeutic for me. Did I pronounce a word in a really strange way? Because I can't even hear myself.
Not that I'm aware of.
Sorry, I forgot to leave a gap.
Oh, there was a bit of a gap there. And it's alright, because they answer question and answer, and if you pause or
exactly.
stop for a thought, then it makes it actually more realistic.
Yeah, that's right, that's what I thought. Stumbling is okay. I get a bit shiny. What question are we up to? 4?
Yes. Did Jim Morrison inspire you? How?
Yes, Jim Morrison inspires me in so many ways. Where do I begin? Firstly, being a performer myself, I have an immense respect for his theatrics, his seduction of his audience, his lack of inhibition, and the way he is just so unabashedly loose on stage and appears to have absolutely no shame for what he's doing up there. And Jim as a writer is also very inspiring to me. I have an incredible appreciation for the beauty and power of language, and Jim is an exquisite artist of words. I find him very inspiring whenever I'm dabbling in my own writing. Jim's character in general is also something I admire very much. His supreme intellect, the excess of literacy, his free-thinking nature, and he certainly displayed being way ahead of his time in terms of a lot of the wisdom that he offered along the way. Also, his very cheeky way of stirring people up and his very profound way of pulling people out of the ruts of ordinary perception. These are attributes that I find incredibly inspiring in any individual. And beyond that, he's also encouraged me to expand my mind and knowledge. Firstly, I was incredibly interested in going back even further and finding out exactly what inspired Jim and what were his influences for him to get to that point where he is creatively and to take the creative route that he did. I found that he was an incredible gateway to brilliant literature and music, very much in line with my own interests and tastes. Great blues artists like Howling Wolf and Muddy Waters. When you listen to those artists, you can really see his blues influences and where those were derived from. Amazing writers like William Blake and Aldous Huxley, even more Nietzsche than I was previously reading, just to name a few. Even the spiritual practice of shamanism. Jim is the reason I know what that is and the reason I decided to explore that a little further as well. I delved into all of this material for my own titivation, of course, but it has also furthered my understanding of Jim and his influences within his work. further on the topic of mind expansion, I definitely think Jim would have had a thing to do with me exploring higher consciousness and embarking on those sacred journeys to the other side that I do enjoy. But mostly, what I find most inspiring about Jim is the way that I feel when I go on those mystical oral journeys with him. For me, it's entirely transcendental bliss, trembling perpetually on the verge of a very welcome madness. And for me, I find those emotions to be incredibly invigorating and inspiring in a myriad of personal and spiritual ways.
Just kind of slowly moving the
That's right, she's allowed to move a little bit, just a general movement. Just move a little bit to your...
Alright.
So still the angle you're on, just
Yeah.
move
My
your...
feet?
Yeah, shuffle.
Like here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When you like slump a little, it's
Yeah.
like,
I don't know like how I should be standing, like,
oh, just
you know what I
normally,
mean?
and just even hand movements are good. I
Yeah.
think. Just like, you know, because you can only see like this.
I feel like a news reporter when I'm doing that though.
Oh, it's
So
fine.
at the moment, you're from where your
Yeah.
top drops there
Yeah,
to the tip of your feather.
yeah,
So that's all that's seen.
okay,
And you're on the very edge
yeah,
So if,
with
Oh,
all this
right,
green
yeah,
on this
okay.
side.
yeah, alright,
so
cool.
if you lean too much this way, it kind of
Like
gets out.
that way, okay, so I should be more
Yeah.
like,
And even if you were just hold your hair or something.
Really?
sometimes- Yeah. Not like
transcendental.
not like constantly, but occasionally if you were to just like,
Adjust,
Yeah, I'm trying not to
adjust
like
yourself.
fidget.
yeah,
Is that okay to fidget?
yeah.
As long as you're not like swaying or any of this sort of stuff.
Just like little tiny adjustments and stuff of yourself.
Is that okay?
I assume so. I
Yeah?
mean, that's what I see in documentaries.
Yeah, because it's more
And it's
natural.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Alright. Question 5. It's a long answer. Mm. 20.
Bike in the background. For you, what's the difference between listening to the Doors and listening to another music band?
Well, I'm incredibly passionate about a lot of music. I love many different bands. It's my oxygen, but no other band seems to be able to send me on quite the same magical, trance-inducing trip like the Doors. For me, listening to the Doors is a psychedelic experience in itself. It's completely intoxicating. I seem to travel to some transcendental country of my mind. If you were to observe me on some of my more private Doors moments, you probably would think that I was under the influence of psychedelics. And for music alone to have that effect on an entirely sober individual speaks volumes for its power. For me, each song is an entirely different trip. The Doors stir something in me that I don't think I can ever truly articulate because it is such a personal inner experience. I've listened to Doors songs thousands of times, over and over again, sometimes all day long. And without fail, there are certain parts of songs that when I hear them, I just have full body chills every time. The Celebration of the Lizard is my favorite piece, and if that ever comes on, I have to be absolutely certain that I have no plans at all for the next 17 minutes, because that is one hell of a journey. As soon as that comes on, I'm no longer in this realm. You know, sometimes it will unexpectedly come on and Jim will say, "Is everybody in?" And, you know, I have to press pause and say, "No, I'm sorry, Jim, I'm not in. I simply don't have the time to be in today." I mean, the Doors wanted to provoke a religious experience in their audience, and they absolutely succeeded in me. Jim was also having a religious experience of his own on stage. The Doors would orchestrate his madness and his nirvana. They would send him into a shamanic trance, and the Doors live, even though it is of course my greatest pain to say that I will never ever be able to witness that, and I would do anything to be able to go back in time and see that. The Doors live, from what I've seen in footage, translates as more of a theatrical rock and roll sermon than just a concert. And they created that theatrical vibe just with 4 guys and their instruments. They didn't even need any special effects or anything like that some bands seem to use to compensate for these days. So another way that they created the theatrical vibe is obviously through the addition of poetry, which was very unique, especially at the time. A lot of my favourite Jim Morrison poems were delivered mid-trance in a live setting, or often from the acid-fueled depths of who knows where. But the Doors, as a band, just play off each other so organically. They often spoke of the telepathic diamond and the psychic link that was present between them, especially in a live setting. It's incredibly obvious. They can have Jim lingering on the precipice of madness just to pull him back, safe and sound, right where they left off. So there was that amazing intentional puppetry of Jim, which was really fun to observe. But there was also often the necessary steering on occasion. If Jim was sinking too far into the darkness and they sensed that, they would, break into something jovial like Light My Fire just to reel him back on in. So, he was always safe there, with their puppetry. So even though there are just so many bands that I have great admiration for and can go on a similar experience with, when it comes to other bands and listening to them, viewing what they present on stage, that level of transcendence and religious experience remains unswayed.
Thanks, Plain.
I was thinking the same thing.
You should hear it in my headphones.
Damn! It was such a long answer.
Yes, and right as you're like at the end, it's like the final, the home run.
Yeah. So we're going to have to do that again?
Oh, we'll get
should we
it in
just
the
do it
next
in a
run.
different-
Yeah.
yeah.
So we'll just keep going.
Yeah.
If you add up all your answers, how long does it take?
That was probably one of the longest ones. The rest, some of them are like, I have fuck all to say about this topic. So for the rest, it's like, here we go. Probably about 20 minutes.
All right.
But that's also adding 1 minute of the dead air. So,
Yeah.
How many questions are left? About 5? 6? So yeah, probably about 15 minutes, really.
This one has a lot more answers questions in it.
What's that one, sorry? The
This
last
has
one?
no. This has more than 6.
Oh yeah, no, what we got left. 6. Can we have a look at that, sorry? Yeah, that's different to the one I
But
put
that's
as
way
well.
more than 6. That's the one you sent me.
Two of those. I don't even like. I didn't even have those answers. Jesus Christ.
If you just in the side of the bag there should be a pen. And just mark out the ones you don't have an answer of.
Yeah.
Just on the very side, the outside of the bag.
4.
The very outside of the bag.
Oh, jeez. Like here?
Yeah, there's a pocket there. There should be. If not, it's on the other side.
No, found it.
Some of them are pretty simple answers, like that I can just wing on the spot. But I'm not sure about the first one. I don't know why there's like actually 5 different questions that I didn't even get in the ones I was sent. Sorry. Two of these questions are basically exactly the same, so anyway, let's just like fill in the rest that we actually have and then we'll deal with the others. It's just like that the last 4
Yeah.
and the one about what story do you like the most.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might have to think about 2 of those for a little while.
We'll just motor through. Whatever you think at the time, we'll just go through.
Yeah.
Because we've got to be conscious of the time, because light's going to go in about an hour.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Right.
Should we maybe move locations and then just like only run them instead of doing all of the questions in a different location?
We'll just try to get all this through in one.
Yeah.
And then if there's any specific ones you want to, when we make it, we'll focus on those ones first.
Okay.
And get those and stuff like that. Like that last one where the plane.
Yeah. Okay, so we're on 7 now?
So we're on what part of Jim's art fits you the most? Music, poetry, film and why?
Question 6?
Yes. It's hard because there's no numbering either on this.
Yeah. Okay. Not doing it with that noise?
No.
Jesus Christ.
Bird like laughter.
Five extra questions on this thing that like I didn't get sent in my thing.
Oh really?
Yeah.
So where did you get the link that you sent?
They did like I don't know if he somehow updated the link because
it's a Dropbox, so it's quite possibly you did.
Yeah, they weren't there when I like got them. 3 of them are okay, but 2 I've kind of got to think about a little bit, like stories, like what's my favorite. But they're not using everything I say anyway, so I don't know if it even matters. Like if I don't.
All the ones you can straight away.
Yeah.
We'll go anyway, and hopefully those ones aren't picking it up too much.
So I just gotta fix this goddamn headphone thing up.
The glitter on your eyes is really pretty on this
Thank you.
camera.
Okay. Okay. 20?
All the different things.
Oh shit. Yeah, just put it behind me.
I just noticed it and I was like,
10.
What part of Jim's art fits you the most? Music, poetry, film, and why?
It really depends on how I'm feeling or where I am in life or where I want to try and transport myself to mentally at the time. The Doors are incredibly erratic, so they have a lot of variety to satisfy someone's moods that are quite the same. I tend to turn to the poetry when I'm feeling introspective or I want to be calmed or soothed. American Prayer is definitely a favourite of mine because then I get the full oral experience of those lullabies with their ring of madness delivered in that sweet honeyed purr of his. Just makes me feel incredibly serene. American Prayer is definitely my tranquilizer. And as much as I love the poetry, I would have to say the music is definitely where my heart lies. And often it's a divine combination of both. Listening to the music alone is otherworldly in itself, but when I combine it with my other love of dance, which I must admit is often uncontrollable anyway when I have the Doors on, I experience an ultimate release, just pure bliss and inner peace. I'm able to go completely within myself and transcend myself. I feel like the times that I've spent just losing my shit dancing to the Doors in this state of mind have been my most authentic moments. I tend to just let the lizard energy guide me as I let them snake weave me into another dimension. I actually did my first ever performance to People Are Strange, and for me it felt incredibly comforting to have Jim's energy there on stage with me. I also do love his films, but I love anything Jim does. I mean, Highway, an hour of Jim walking around in the desert, what's not to love about that? I do feel like he did miss out on a lot of his potential exploring film due to his untimely passing. But we are also incredibly unlucky for the abundance of material that is available due to the Doors' passion in film.
Alright, go on to the next one.
Yeah. Pretty sure these are really short answers. Yeah. 10.
What Doors song had the biggest impact on you and why?
I don't have that one either.
Okay.
Oh my god.
oh jeez.
So if you have something, we'll just get it. So just wait a couple of seconds and try to answer it.
I know what song, but I really would like to put more into the answer, you know? Oh, this is so shit. I don't know what to do.
Maybe just rehearse it in your mind or just say it out loud and decide whether or not you like the sound of it. Just talk about them.
Yeah.
You love
So
them.
we'll just say it now. So just say whatever you need, and then you've got some thoughts there. So if you want to say it again and you've had some time later, then we'll do it.
It's hard. I wonder if it'll be okay if I don't answer all of them.
Yeah,
because I
I'm
really
sure it's
don't.
fine. If you don't want to do that now, we'll just go to the next one.
Yeah, can we just they won't be in order, but can we do the ones that I have and then do the other ones after, or?
Yeah, I'll just keep, you hit the one that you don't know, we'll just keep going.
Yeah.
Because
Here's definitely updated.
it's going to take too long to try to work out which ones.
Yeah. So the next one is about how did you find out that he was a poet or something?
Yeah. And then the next one is how did you get to read his poetry?
Yeah.
Yeah, alright. So do that first one. Don't move too much around those leaves. I can hear you
Yeah,
crunching
okay.
them.
All good.
10.
How did you get to know that Jim Morrison was a poet?
When I first started researching Jim, I often saw him referred to as the great American poet, so I was vaguely aware, but after reading his poetry books, that's when I truly respected this. That's it.
Okay, we'll go to the next one.
Yeah. I'm so angry.
Ankle shot.
Because, yeah, sure, I could talk shit about it, but I, like, didn't really want to. Like, I
Yeah.
wanted to actually think about it
Yeah.
and do it justice.
Yeah, that's true. I feel that.
Yeah, there's no way they're going to be using everything I say because there's like several people being interviewed for the documentary and they're just choosing the best stuff.
Who's making the documentary?
Guy in Canada.
Huh, that's good.
Ten.
How did you get to read his poetry?
That old fanatical ex-boyfriend of mine many moons ago bought me Wilderness, which I promptly devoured, closely followed by The Lords and New Creatures. And shortly after that I heard American Prayer for the first time, which was a wonderful experience. It was magical to hear his words come to life and also to recognize the poems that I had read from existing Doors pieces, reading them in the books and then listening to them again in the songs that they were featured in. For some reason, it just made them seem a lot more profound and meaningful to me from that point onwards. There is some Jim poetry that I have purposely left untouched, as I'd really like to savor that small fragment that remains for as long as I possibly can, unless of course we are blessed with some undiscovered material floating around out there.
Some kid was just like walking, sneaking.
Right here.
Yes.
And then ran off.
Yeah.
As soon as I like realised she was there, she like told me.
Yeah, I saw her coming.
And her mum was just like, whatever.
Yeah.
My kid can go and talk to strangers.
Alright, what's the next question on your list?
What do you know about Jim's interest towards literature and how did he start to write?
Fuck!
Alright.
There was only 12 questions when I got this, and there's like 8 more questions or something.
Just answer them as best you can. And if it sounds good,
Yeah, there's 20 questions here.
20. When does this need to be done by?
Well,
Soon
it
as
can only
possible.
really be done, like, I don't want to have to organise it again or
Yeah.
anything, but...
And then the next one is, do you know who influenced Jim in his writings?
I've basically already answered that stuff. Like,
So that's
in my
another
other
one?
answer.
That's another one you don't know?
No,
Alright.
but I already covered that.
How did Jim's art influence your thinking and the way you
Yeah.
see life?
Let me see what this is. Yeah, I've got that. Ten.
How did Jim's art influence your thinking and the way you see life?
Mostly just the daily mantras that I've mentioned flowing constantly through my mind. He has encouraged and reiterated my philosophical way of thinking. I derive an extreme level of comfort out of that. He also inspires me to try and take more risks and give less fucks creatively and in many other aspects of life. But the most important, all-encompassing message that I have from Jim is simple yet very profound, and that is just to let it roll. When dealing with the universe and the trials and tribulations that one can face, that's always a line that is constantly at the forefront of my mind, to just let it roll.
And then the next one, how did Jim change your life in a good or bad way?
It's like, horrible. He's taken over my life.
Yeah.
I have nothing but Jim.
Exactly. Ten.
How did Jim change your life in a good or bad way?
Jim's changed my life in many good ways. The cathartic bliss that I derive when I'm listening to the Doors is definitely an extreme pleasure of mine in life, and exploring my emotions, negative and positive, in a comforting way. Jim's always been a really comforting figure for me and a guide to turn to. I feel like everybody should be able to find self-transcendence in some form and escape from the often suffocating bounds of reality. For me, one of those outlets is the majesty of the Doors. And my thing is falling
That's
out.
alright, there's a plane flying over.
Okay, that's good.
It's a good time for your headphone to pull out.
What the fuck's with these small planes? The closest airfield for those is Archerfield.
Maybe Saturday is their day to go on a joyride. Because all the planes that have flown over are like tiny planes.
Are you able to like try and get that other one in there at all? The other, like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Let's try this again. I hurt you.
That's okay.
Is that high?
Yeah.
And then this one.
Yeah, I can go around the other side. Oh, that was a fucking screaming child.
I've got it amplified.
Huh?
I've got it amplified.
Oh,
at the
really?
moment.
Are you good?
Yeah, I was waiting for these people to fuck off.
And the screaming child.
Huh?
And the screaming child. There's
There it is. Screaming child found.
Thank you. Okay.
Just hold off and playing just for a second.
What are you looking at?
I'm just looking at that, making sure that it's still recording.
Oh, no, oh, that thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright. Is there any noise? I can't hear anything.
No. Oh.
There's a little bit, but it's
You
not
alright?
very loud. So you're doing the same one or the next one?
Sorry?
Are you doing the same one or the next one?
What was that one we just did?
How did
That
Jim
was-
change your life in a good or bad way? Well, in a god or bad way is this question.
Yeah, we'll have to do that again because of the noise, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah. 20.
How did Jim change your life in a good or bad way?
Jim's changed my life in many good ways. The cathartic bliss that I derive when I'm listening to the Doors is definitely an extreme pleasure of mine in life, and exploring my emotions, negative and positive, in a comforting way. Jim's always been a really comforting figure for me to turn to in that way. I feel like everybody should be able to find self-transcendence in some form and an escape from the often suffocating bounds of reality. For me, one of those outlets is the majesty of the Doors. And another quite peculiar way that Jim has benefited my life is by eradicating my once extreme fear of lizards. I used to recoil in fear at the sight of them, but in recent fears and after a few psychedelic experiences of a reptilian nature, I tend to view them as more of a kindred spirit. I'll see a lizard and think, "Hi Jim," rather than running away and screaming. If I was to mention any bad ways that Jim had changed my life at all, I could only mention the Doorsian trances that I've mentioned previously. Although they are spiritually enriching, it's not always something that I have time available for due to the aforementioned tedious bounds of reality. There have been a few times where I've been late and my explanation can only be, "Sorry, a Doors trance." Okay, there's two more that I know. And yeah, I'll try answer some of the others, but...
Well, that had a cockatoo or whatever, galah, going off. No. Hopefully that didnget it as much.
It was a loud bird.
Yeah.
Did you hear it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll just go to the next one.
Yeah.
And this, for me, is what do you think is so special about Jim's energy since there's so many people around?
How many seconds do you think you need to read that one? 10?
Yeah, just say it at the 20.
At 20, yeah.
What do you think is so special about Jim's energy since there's so many people around the world who still love Jim even 46 years after he died?
Well, I mean, look at Jesus. People are still wild about him, right? Really. It may be a joke, but for some of us it is that way. Jim is so many different things in one. He has so many different facets. He's a poet, a philosopher, a budding shaman, therapist, free thinker, artist, protester, rebel, rock star, southern gentleman. To many brothers and sisters of the pale forest, he is godlike. He is our unspeakably lovely Dionysian lizard king. I can only assume that many other fans across the world have had a similar experience when engaging in the listening experience of the Doors and in their admiration for Jim as a person and for what he represents and his work. The advent of social media has made this very apparent. There are groups on Facebook where fans are just constantly all day long sharing Jim, admiration for him, images, videos, music, quotes, and just sheer admiration in general. It's really beautiful to see the cult-like following that Jim still has 46 years later, and all of the lizard disciples that are running about all over the world. It's really reassuring for me to finally be among my people and people that actually understand the Doors and get references and know the song I'm referring to straight away. It's quite uncommon for me to come across this in day-to-day life, and a lot of people these days seem incredibly taken by and caught up in talentless tripe that seems to pass for music these days. So I think it's incredibly important to ensure that the great musical artists of our time are not forgotten and are always in the collective consciousness. I do everything I can to keep that music flowing into the world. And when it comes to the Doors, I probably do that on a level of people thinking I'm probably insane, and I'm more than okay with that. There will never be another one like Jim. His art will echo throughout the ages, and he will live on for eternity and beyond that too. Yeah, I really like to do that one again where we have the sound at the end.
I have to check her face, I'm closer.
Huh?
He was like, why aren't I on the big blanket? I'm sitting on a towel. I was like, I'm going to check your face and make sure it looks perfect.
Ready for the next one?
Yep.
What's that one you've got?
What story event do you like most from Jim Morrison, The Doors history?
Okay, we'll just go to the next one, which is about the places he lived and his grave.
Yep.
Okay.
How did you feel Jim's energy in the places he lived and at his grave in if you visited any of the places?
If I'm even just listening to the Doors or watching them or reading Jim, I feel his energy. So yes, Paris was definitely next level. It was all very hard to process because it was a dream that I'd had for many, many years to visit him. And it all just finally hit me when I was standing there just staring at his grave thinking, you know, that's Jim, there he is. I stood there looking at his grave and listening to the end in its entirety. I also found some really beautiful rocks just behind the gate of his grave and a lovely amethyst that I plan on having made into jewelry sometime. I gave Jim some roses when I was there. Did involve having to jump the fence that was put up to stop people from loitering around his grave, but I'm sure he would appreciate that rebellious act, and there was no way I was going all the way to Paris to view my sweet Lizard King through metal bars. It was also really beautiful to see the party atmosphere at his grave, people smoking and drinking wine, all different languages and nationalities united just by their love for Jim. It was really hard to leave. It was the closest I'd ever been and ever would be to Jim. I was lucky enough to visit twice when I was in Europe. The second time I visited, I listened to the celebration of the lizard and skipped merrily through the graveyard. I like to think that Jim might have got a bit of a kick out of that. I really can't wait to go back next year. I also visited his house where he was found. I was incredibly excited to see that, but of course it was also very morbid and sad to know that that's where he spent his last moments, as far as we know at least. I visited the Sacré-Cœur as well, where Jim liked to write poetry on the stairs, sat on those for a little while and just soaked it all in. Even just walking the streets of Paris, I felt his energy around me constantly. For me, Paris was all about Jim. I always associated Paris with Jim since I first learnt of his time there, and that's the reason I had always wanted to go there. So I was experiencing an incredible magical high and a lot of Jim energy when I was there, but of course at the same time an extreme sense of melancholy as well. There were a few locations I unfortunately didn't get to go to that I will be visiting next time, and an American Jim tour is absolutely on my list as well.
How loud was that baby?
Not very, it's sounded like it was ages away, to be honest.
Oh, this is pointing that way, so it's probably why. Those point down, so hopefully they don't pick it up.
Did you want to do the other one that had sound on it last night?
So none of these are on your thing either?
No.
So what story or part of Jim Morrison's life?
Like there's some of
Yeah.
those that I can just answer, but I'd like to think about 3 of them that have been mentioned. But we'll just do what I can. But the one, I think it was question 5 that we had a sound in. What's the difference between listening to The Doors and another band?
Yeah, possibly. So we can get a different shot, and
Yeah,
then we'll
okay.
do the ones you want to do and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because even that last one, that was a plane again. But we'll just slightly change the frame. I'll clap for you since you got your hands full.
Sorry?
I'll clap for you since you got your hands full.
Let me know when you're ready.
So which one you doing?
What's the difference between listening to The Doors and another band?
Yeah. Alright.
Ready?
Yep.
The noise over there is okay?
Let's go shut up. Yep. For you, what's the difference between listening to The Doors and listening to another music band?
I'm incredibly passionate about a lot of music. I love many different bands. It's my oxygen. But no other band seems to be able to send me on quite the same magical, trance-inducing inner trip like The Doors can. For me, listening to The Doors is a psychedelic experience in itself. It's completely intoxicating. I seem to travel to some transcendental country of my mind. If you were to observe me in some of my more private moments with The Doors, you probably would think I was under the influence of psychedelics. And for music alone to have that effect on an entirely sober individual speaks volumes for its power. For me, each song is an entirely different trip. The Doors stir something in me that I don't think I will ever truly be able to articulate because it is such a personal inner experience. I've listened to Doors songs thousands of times, over and over again, sometimes all day long. And without fail, there are certain parts of songs that when I hear them, I have full body chills every time. Celebration of the Lizard is my favorite piece, and if that ever comes on, I have to be absolutely certain that I have no plans at all for the next 17 minutes because that is one hell of a journey. As soon as that comes on, I am no longer in this realm. You know, sometimes it'll unexpectedly come on and Jim will say, "Is everybody in?" And I have to press pause and say, "I'm sorry, Jim, I'm not in. I simply don't have the time to be in today." The Doors wanted to provoke a religious experience in their audience, and they absolutely succeeded in doing that with me. Jim was also having a religious experience of his own on stage. The Doors would orchestrate his madness and his nirvana. They would send him into shamanic trances, and the Doors live, even though it is obviously my greatest pain to say that I will never ever be able to witness that, and I would do anything to be able to go back in time and see that. The Doors live, from the footage that I constantly view, translates as more of a theatrical rock and roll sermon than just a concert. And they created that theatrical vibe just with 4 guys and their instruments and words. They didn't even need any special effects or visuals or anything that bands these days seem to compensate with. And another facet that created the theatrical vibe was, of course, the addition of poetry, which was incredibly unique, especially at the time. A lot of my favorite poems were delivered in these mid-trances in a live setting, or often from the acid-fueled depths of who knows where. But the Doors, as a band, just play off each other so organically. They often spoke of the telepathic diamond and the psychic link that is present between them. And in a live setting, that is very, very apparent to see. They can have Jim lingering on the precipice of madness just to pull him back safe and sound, right where they left off. So there was that amazing intentional puppetry of Jim, but, and you know, that was really fun to observe, but also necessary steering on occasion. If Jim was ever sinking too far into the darkness and they sensed that, they would jump into something jovial like Light My Fire just to reel him back on in. So Jim was always safe being their puppet, being able to explore his own emotions in that live setting. So when it comes to listening to other bands and viewing what they present on stage, although I have immense appreciation for so many bands, especially from that era, that religious experience and that particular level of transcendence appears to be unassuaged.
Hopefully those mics weren't picking up them
Okay.
talking in your background. Because they're all up in behind a tree there, having photos taken.
Have to do it again?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
And there's freaking loud motorbikes and stuff in the background.
To your chest, like this.
Yeah, keep
Yeah, I
it
wasn't
keep
sure
it closed.
what you wanted,
Yeah,
like
that,
this.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's
Or you
We're
turn
running
around
out of
so
light too, hey? Like,
yeah.
Flip the book.
huh?
Turn it around.
So his face.
That's a better picture.
Oh, you prefer that one? Okay.
Yeah.
But yes, we're running out of light, so
It's a fucking young lion. He hates those photos. Yeah. So as long as we, you know,
get your favourites out.
maybe that can be our excuse. We ran out of light. Somehow we answered the questions in a completely different order.
Yeah.
But I'll try and answer some of the others. I just don't feel right answering some of them.
So yeah, whenever you're ready
Oh.
for it.
Shit, I gotta quickly do the phone thing. So that same question again?
Yep, unless you have another one you desperately want
I
to.
really like that. It's one of my favourites. So hopefully no one makes any noise.
Problem is
this
it's
time.
so long that.
Huh?
Problem is it's so long that it
Yeah.
increases the risk of it being ruined.
Interesting, hey.
20.
For you, what's the difference between listening to the Doors and listening to another music band?
I'm incredibly passionate about a lot of music. I love many different bands. It's my oxygen. But no other band seems to be able to send me on quite the same magical, trance-inducing inner trip like the Doors can. For me, listening to the Doors is a psychedelic experience in itself. It's completely intoxicating. I seem to travel to some transcendental country of my mind. if you were to observe me in some of my more private Doors moments, you probably would think that I was under the influence of psychedelics. And the music alone, to have that effect on an entirely sober individual, speaks volumes for its power. For me, each song is an entirely different trip. The Doors stir something in me that I don't think I'll ever truly be able to articulate, because it is such a personal inner experience. I've listened to Doors songs thousands of times, over and over again, sometimes all day long. And without fail, there are certain parts of songs that, when I hear them, I have full-body chills every time. Celebration of the Lizard is my absolute favorite piece, and if that ever comes on, I have to be absolutely certain that I have no plans at all for the next 17 minutes, because that is one hell of a journey. As soon as that comes on, I am no longer in this realm. You know, sometimes it'll unexpectedly come on and Jim will say, "Is everybody in?" And I have to press pause and say, "I'm sorry, Jim, I'm not in. I simply don't have the time to be in today." The Doors wanted to provoke a religious experience in their audience, and they absolutely succeeded in me. Jim was also having a religious experience of his own on stage. The Doors would orchestrate his madness and his nirvana. They would send him into those shamanic trances. And the Doors live, even though it is obviously my greatest pain to say that I will never ever be able to witness that, and I would do anything to be able to go back in time and see that. When viewing the Doors live, it translates as more of a theatrical rock and roll sermon than just a concert, and they created that theatrical vibe just with 4 guys and their instruments and their words. They didn't need any special effects or visuals or anything that bands these days seem to compensate with. Another facet that really added to the theatrical, dramatic vibe of their shows was the addition of poetry. Some of my favorite Jim Morrison poems were delivered in those live settings when he had slipped into one of those trances, or often from the acid-fueled depths of who knows where. But the Doors as a band just play off each other so organically. They often speak of a telepathic diamond and the psychic link that was present between them, and that is very, very apparent to see, especially when you view them in a live setting. They could have Jim lingering on the precipice of madness just to pull him back, safe and sound, right where they left off. So there was that amazing intentional puppetry of Jim, which was really fun to observe, but also necessary steering on occasion. If Jim was sinking too far into the darkness and they sensed that, they would jump into something jovial like Light My Fire just to reel him back on in and bring him back to some level of reality. So he was always safe there, being the Doors' little puppet, and vice versa on occasion. So when it comes to listening to other bands and viewing what they present on stage, although I have an immense appreciation for many different artists, especially from that era, that religious experience and that particular level of transcendence remains unassuaged.
Probably the best of them.
Is there another one that we didn't get because of the sound? Like, I think there was
Well, the very last one, the How Did You Feel Jim's energy in the places he lived.
So do you want to do that one again, and then we can like try and answer as many as I can while there's of the others while they're still light?
Yep, so just get the ones you definitely want answered.
This is the last one that I've got. Did you need a little longer to answer this, to ask this one?
I'll just say bits of it.
Yeah, okay.
I can't pronounce half that stuff
Yeah.
without trying to learn.
Very luscious. 20.
How did you feel Jim's energy in the places he lived and at his grave, if you visited any of the places?
If I'm even just listening to the Doors or watching them or reading Jim, I feel his energy. So yes, Paris was definitely next level. It was all very hard to process because it was a dream that I had had for many, many years to visit him. And it all just finally hit me when I was standing there, just staring at his grave, thinking, you know, that's Jim, there he is. I stood there looking at his grave and listening to the end in its entirety. I also found some really beautiful rocks just behind the gate of his grave, and a really lovely amethyst that I plan on having made into some jewelry sometime. I gave Jim some roses when I was there. That did involve having to jump the fence that was put up. I'm sure Jim would appreciate that little rebellious act though. And there was no way I was going all the way to Paris to view my sweet Lizard King through metal bars. It was also really beautiful to see the party atmosphere at his grave. People smoking and drinking wine, all different languages and nationalities, united just by their love for Jim. It was really hard for me to leave because it was the closest I'd ever been and ever would be to Jim. I was lucky enough to visit twice during my trip to Europe. The second time I visited, I listened to the celebration of the lizard while I skipped merrily through the graveyard. I like to think Jim may have got a bit of a kick out of that. I really can't wait to go back next year. I also visited his house where he was found. I was incredibly excited to see his house, but of course it was also very morbid and sad to know that that's where he spent his last moments, as far as we know at least. I visited the Sacre-Cœur as well, where Jim liked to write poetry on the steps. Sat on those for a little while, just soaking it all in. Even just walking the streets of Paris, I felt his energy around me constantly, knowing I was walking the same streets he did. For me, Paris was all about Jim, and I always associated it with him since I first learnt of his time there. That's the reason I always wanted to go there. So I was experiencing an incredible magical energy high there, and a lot of Jim energy, but of course at the same time an extreme sense of melancholy as well. There were a few locations in Paris special to Jim that I didn't get to. I'll definitely be going to those next time, and I also have an American Jim tour on my list. Okay, now let's try and answer some of the ones I don't have. I might just like have a look at those questions again. Okay.
How would you imagine meeting with Jim in person? What would you have liked to talk about?
I'm not really sure if I could imagine what that would be like. I think for me it would be entirely surreal, and I very likely might be one of those painfully embarrassing groupie fangirls that might even faint at the sight of him, but I do my best to compose myself and come across as a sane individual that he might like to talk to about, you know, psychedelics, literature, music. I'd really love to go out and, you know, hoe down on some good Mexican food with him, get a little stoned, drink a little beer, you know, just engage in all the activities that he really loved to do. But for me, even thinking about the concept of meeting Jim is rather mind-blowing, and I am very sad that I never ever will get the chance to do so Unless, of course, we meet on the other side. That's all I got.
Is that bird loud?
Hey?
Was that bird loud?
Is the bird loud?
A little bit.
Okay. The one about favourite song?
Okay.
Impact.
What Doors song had the biggest impact?
Yeah.
Not his favourite song.
Yeah, that's right.
What Doors song had the biggest impact on you and why?
For me, there are far too many stories and impacts and meanings that I could possibly ever have time to tell you here, but I will make mention of one song that helps me constantly, and that is Lost Little Girl. For me, I can't even tell you the amount of times that song has pulled me out of a dark place and steered me in the right direction with Jim's voice of guidance. It's a very subjective song, and no matter what I happen to be lost in at the time in my life, Jim's words and his guiding voice always seem to give me the courage and inspiration to pull me out of whatever dark place I am in. The other ones out there?
Which of the Doors concerts would you have liked to attend live?
Yeah,
That one sounds like it doesn't really need too much.
Exactly. That's a good one.
As long as you make it a full question, so you say the question in your answer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, because it's so short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because obviously me telling you the question is not in.
Yeah. Okay.
So that. Which one of the Doors concerts would you have liked to attend live? Just a second. Live. Alright, go for it. I'm just hearing cockatoos and fucking live.
Yeah.
We'll say again. Which one of the Doors concerts would you have liked to attend live?
Absolutely. The Doors song the Doors concert that I would love to attend live is the Hollywood Bowl. It's one of my favourite concerts. I have watched that more times than I could ever possibly remember. Even though the Doors weren't incredibly pleased with that show themselves, to me, they were all fucking hard cunt. Rude. Gone? Okay. What's that? Oh, the
That
phone?
was my phone.
Okay.
Yeah, put it on silent.
It was an alarm.
Okay.
Which one of the Doors concerts would you have liked to attend live?
The Doors concert that I would have loved to attend live is definitely the Hollywood Bowl. That's always been a favourite of mine, and I couldn't even tell you the amount of times that I've watched that concert. Even though the Doors weren't incredibly impressed with their own performance that night, I loved it. I really loved that Jim managed to somehow drop 2 hits of acid and be completely capable of performing an amazing show. There's a lot of really beautiful moments in that concert, like his Ode to the Grasshopper, for example, and the moment where Raymond Zarek claims to have seen him being taken into a trance and dancing with the spirit of the Indians. It's just a really, really amazing show, and I love that more than I can ever possibly say. Alright, what other ones are there?
What story or part of Jim Morrison's life, heard or read in any book, had an impact on you or entertained you?
Okay. One of my favourite stories about Jim is that loud? Like, is
No,
that
it's alright.
good?
It's alright. But that one fucking hurt.
Do you want to ask it again? Or?
Yeah. What story or part of Jim... It's probably actually going to get worse now because the sun's going down.
Yeah.
All the insects are going to start coming up and other bullshit.
Should we just do our best and like,
Yeah.
if it's usable, it's usable?
Yeah. Yeah. What story or part of Jim Morrison's life, heard or read in any books, had an impact on you or entertained you?
One of my favorite stories about Jim is his little story about the dead Indians on the highway when he was very young and he was driving past a car accident and saw a bunch of dead Indians on the highway, and he claims that the souls of those Indians leapt out and jumped right into his own body. And I find that really intriguing that he had that story at such a young age and had that memory given the direction he took in life and how captivated he was with the Indians and the spirit of the Indians and shamanic trances and dancing and things like that. I really like to think that that story is entirely true because I think it is very apparent when you view him, especially on stage when he's in his element and in those trances. Another story I really love that I find very entertaining is when they were touring in Amsterdam and Jim was walking along the streets with Jefferson Airplane, being offered all types of drugs from every single person that he came across, and he allegedly ate everything that he was given right then and there on the spot, including a giant block of hash, which resulted in him collapsing before he even hit the stage to perform. Poor old Ray Manzarek, bless him, had to then perform the entire show by himself, never having done it before, and playing the organ and the bass at the same time. Poor Jim was rushed off to hospital, but somehow miraculously the next day was able to perform in a live setting as well. I just find it really impressive, the things that Jim put himself through and the things that he then accomplished after treating his body that way.
Yeah, that's good.
Is there any others that are like... how do you think Jim really died? Huh?
Sleeping bed.
Yeah.
How do you think Jim really died?
I really wish we all knew for sure, but unfortunately none of us ever really will, and we can only really speculate on what happened. For me, as tragic as it is, I do think that it was an accidental overdose of heroin. He never really was into that himself, but as we know, Pam was very much into heroin, especially in their time in Paris, and apparently convinced Jim to start dabbling in that himself, or in one way or another. I'm not really sure if she had a direct influence over it, but either way, he was experimenting with it, and unfortunately took a dose that was a little stronger than he was planning for. The main reason that I think this is what happened, instead of all the other stories about him just being sick and having the flu and, you know, dying that way, is because I did read a book about the love story between Pam and Jim, and knowing that Pam died in exactly the same way 2 years later, claiming that she wanted to be with Jim and she wanted to die when Jim died at the same age, to me just cements the fact that that is actually how it happened. And either way, even though it was a tragic loss to lose Jim at that age, I think that he was too special for this world, and he had really lived more in that 27 years than most people live in their entire lives. So I think that in his preparation for the other side, in his entire life, and his immense curiosity about death, I'm actually quite glad that he finally got to satisfy that curiosity, and I really hope that he is on the other side with the feast of friends like he always wished for. I don't know about the other ones, they're a bit like, probably doesn't matter if we miss out, because some of them, like, I've basically said that the answer to, like,
Yeah. It's starting to get pretty dark now.
yeah. So I'll just tell him which ones I didn't do, which was literature.
You'll be able to tell from the footage anyway and audio.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that should be fine. I'll just be like rambling bullshit that's not even like interesting.
And half your likes, that's the ones they pick.
Yeah, that's true. Pretty much answered all of them except for like one that